All right, hi everybody. Welcome back to celebrating the brand ambassador. I'm currently here with Coco, who is tuning in from Berlin. Coco is the Hendrix brand ambassador. Joining us in a little while is going to be Stephanie SHEN, who is the brand ambassador for the Dead Rabbit whiskey. Currently, if you can believe this, poor Stephanie, her entire town's electricity went out. That's the first I've ever heard of that, except for if there's like a hurricane happening, but her entire town. And she's currently driving to a different town so she can plug in. So hopefully she'll be able to join us. But Facebook is kind of mean this way. If you don't go live within the first like 7 or 8 minutes of your scheduled time, they kick you off. So we have to start without Stephanie, but I know she'll be joining us soon. But for start off with Coco. Hi, Coco.
Hi, Elaine. Thank you so much for having me.
It's really my pleasure. So I always start off with my first question is, obviously I said who you work for, but tell us, in grants, who you work for, the brand, and like what your responsibilities are for Hendrix Gin.
Alrighty. Well, my name is Coco, and I am the Hendrix Gin ambassador to Germany. My job is practically to represent the brand in the drinks and bar community in Germany. Sometimes a cheeky little trip to Switzerland and Austria, but maybe mainly around here. Yes.
Very cool. I like the cheeky little trip to Austria every once in a while. Like, because I can, because I'm right there. Why not? And so a lot of your job, like responsibility wise, the one thing, and I know we're going to talk about it more in depth, is like you create a lot of immersive experiences, correct?
Yes, I guess that's my favorite thing to do is organize events, small events, large events, and kind of bring the Hendrix Gin brand world to life. That's I guess what I'm most known for in the community.
I've definitely been to, I think, some of your events, and they're definitely always interesting and very quirky, just like the Hendrix brand. So this brand very specific. I know you have a great story of how you started working for the company and why you chose to work for Hendrix, because it is. I mean, I think Hendrix. I do think Coco. So you do embody the brand. So tell me why this brand did you choose to represent it?
Well, so we're actually a whole team of really incredible brand ambassadors, and I'm fortunate enough to be one of them. I spent some years traveling. So I started off working in Berlin in a cocktail bar called Stagger Lee, and then moved on to London, Paris, and New York with the Experimental Cocktail Club, back to London. And I, at some point, I felt like it's time to go home. I really, really missed home. I missed my family. I missed my friends. We're all here in Berlin. And one night I packed all my bags without telling anyone. I jumped on the first plane back home. And when I landed in Berlin, the first thing I always do when I land anywhere in the world is I always switch on my phone and I call my mother,
I love
because she
that.
would be very, very upset if I wouldn't. She'd be very worried. So I switched on my phone. And before I had a chance to call my mom, there was a message, a Facebook message from a gentleman called David Piper. At that time, global brand ambassador for Hendrix Gin. And he asked me to call him. It was urgent. And he said he's got some something really interesting for me. So I called him up at the airport. And when he picked up the phone, he asked me what I was doing, where I was at. And yeah, he basically offered me the job on the spot. So before I even had the chance to tell anyone that I'm back in Germany, before I even arrived back home in my apartment, it was already on the table. And originally I didn't plan to start working immediately because I had a long period of working in bars, but this was way too interesting. It was such a sweet and interesting offer. I couldn't refuse. So
Now,
that was
the reason
almost
why I
eight
asked you
years
this as
ago.
well, I love that story. I love the fact it's the first thing. I also love the fact you call your mother, because I want my daughter one day to do that. I'm a terrible daughter. I don't call my mother half as much as I should. But the particular brand, this is something that people say to me all the time. It's like, you must love the brand. It must be something that, and I do believe in this, that incorporates who you are as a person. So, what about a Hendrix really appeals to you as a person, as your personality?
I don't really think that one can look for a brand. A brand usually finds its brand ambassador. Um, a lot of people believe that I got the job because I'm wearing, fancy vintage suits and have a certain appreciation for this surreal and all things vintage. But it was actually the artistic freedom. So Hendrix Gin gives me the opportunity to go really, really far and really, really deep, explore some crazy uncharted territories that I can imagine with other brands would be difficult um, to navigate through. So Hendrix allows me to, whenever I bring the brand world to life, to create moments, events, experiences that are so unique, so
Give me an
unusual. I
example.
know
Like,
that's
what's
such
one
a
of your
brand
favorite events?
world, but
Give me an example. Like, what are your favorite events that you've ever executed, and like what was involved? And if
all
anybody,
right.
those of you who are watching, if you want to ask a very specific question, just put it in the chat box as well.
So my favorite event that was about 3 years ago, it was for the launch of Midsummer Solstice in Germany and also my 5th anniversary with the brand. It was on August 12th, I believe, the peak of the Perseids, which is an annual meteor shower. So for that occasion, we invited Professor Ben Moore, who's the professor of astrophysics at the University of Zurich, to
How
give
did
us a
you even
lecture
know
about
about
the.
Professor Ben Moore? Like, you just thought to yourself, "Hey, I'm going to invite this professor because I know so much about the stars and the planets, and it's summer solstice. Of course, we do."
Why not? I mean, that's the kind of thing that is part of the Hendrix DNA, to do things that are that crazy, that are so unique that no one could even think of. So he actually came over. He said yes. He joined us in the middle of nowhere in a forest where there was no artificial light or not much, and we had great fun. We had a great dinner, drinks, then listened to his lecture, then switched off all the lights and watched the shooting stars
And
go by.
what did
That
the
was one of.
bartenders think of this? Like, I'm assuming it was a bartender event, correct?
I hope they loved it. Yes.
I mean, I've
So
never been invited to see the stars. I mean, I think that's a really creative event. You bring people in the middle of the forest and they get them to see the star, you get a lecture about. I mean, that's something that's not exactly, like it is something that's outside the brand norms. And like, is it more about building a relationship with the brand rather than over communicating the brand message for you?
so so you're absolutely right. This was a bartender event. And what made it so special is we had around 80 guests, 80 bartenders from all over Germany and also parts of Switzerland. And what's really particularly special about it that every single guest covered his and her own travel. So no flights or trains were paid for by the brand. And some people flew in from quite far away to be part of it. And that really that was one of the most humbling moments for me, to see that people actually really um, spend their own money and their own time to be part of something that I created, something that Hendrix Gin created at that time.
Wow, that's very cool. Yeah, people, bartenders spending their own money to come to an event, and they must have blew them away, because it was something really unique. They learned about stars, and they learned about, and it was also your anniversary, right? Your 5th anniversary, working with the company. And didn't they make you your own bottle of Hendrix gin, like something very special?
They did, they did.
Yeah,
I have a
where
little
is it? Go for it.
secret storage of all.
And for those of you tuning
So
in, so Stephanie is running a little bit late. She got stuck. Her town ran out of. If you were tuning in to see Stephanie as well, she will be coming on. She got her town ran out of power, so well the power went down. So she's finding a power source as we speak. But Coco, yeah, what did they make you for your 5th anniversary?
this makes me so incredibly proud. So this is a, what does it say? Single batch, one of one. Coco Gin. Basically, it's Hendrix Gin with an additional infusion of maple, orange, and cocoa. Duh.
I love that. Coco. And have you ever actually tasted it, or is it just staying
I
sealed
did.
forever?
I did. No, 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 no. It is open. I have made myself a martini with it, but I only use it for very, very rare occasions.
As you should. All right. So basically, I'd love to hear you, because one of the things we talked about yesterday was that you spent a significant amount of your time like working in bars, but you have worked behind the bar, but you also, when you worked for ECC, you worked on the floor, because that seems to be a special skill set that they recognize in you about working with people and managing them. So tell us a little story, about this and how you believe, why you like chose working on the floor, and then also how those skills have now translated back over to being a brand ambassador. Because I always find there's certain skills that everybody can take from their current jobs and bring to the table, but this is more specific.
So my first steps in the bar community were actually behind the bar, but not really in a cocktail bar. It was more of a dive bar, a pretty cool dive bar. Had lots of fun, but at some point I realized that I wanted to focus on something more complex. This is how I started working at Staggerly Berlin. And I always wanted to become a bartender. At that time, it was this traditional way to go. You started as a bar back, you work your way up to become a waiter or a host. And then at some point, when you earned it, you step behind the bar. Today, I know that these different
Stephanie's
roles
here.
require complete.
I can introduce.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, Stephanie, you made it.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, it's not the sexiest of backgrounds, but
I'm just impressed you made it. You drove to another town.
I had to drive to my parents. I was like, oh my God, I need to use your house in total silence and loads of light right now.
Wait, and I have to hear the story. So what you were saying, Coco, we're going to get back to your story, but like the entire town went down?
So basically, they're doing roadworks just outside the town, and we had no notification, but the power just went. So we got in contact with some of our friends that live locally. Their power was also gone, and it just was like, oh God, we need to get somewhere that has like power source and internet and light. So I was like, I need to call my parents. So I called my parents, and Google Maps is like, yeah, it'll be an hour. I was like, okay, we'll make it, we'll have about 10-15 minutes to spare. We get on the road and there's a car accident. And it was like,
oh, no.
That saying of like, it doesn't rain, but it pours.
Oh, yeah.
Today.
I experienced that 2 weeks ago trying to get to Berlin to the trade show. I almost didn't make it. I kept getting stuck in multiple different incidents. So yeah, I'm so impressed that you made it. And Coco, we're going to get back to your question, but first so Stephanie can get caught up. Stephanie, so I always ask people to begin the brand you work for and what your responsibilities are for that brand. I know yours is a little complex at the moment, but yeah, sum it up if you can.
So hi everybody, my name is Stephanie SHEN. I am the global brand ambassador for Dead Rabbit Irish Whiskey. So pre-COVID, my role would have been to essentially embody Dead Rabbit Irish Whiskey and almost like a religious person go and convert people to the wonders of Dead Rabbit Irish Whiskey. Also to create cocktails, show my lovely face at events and essentially just try and get everyone super pumped about with Irish whiskey and very specifically Dead Rabbit Irish Whiskey. But then since the lockdown, I've become a bit of an everything person. It's kind of like if there's a gap, it's like, oh, I guess I'll just go do this thing now. So I'm now working with gins, other Irish whiskey brands. I'm looking at marketing type things. This is all stuff that I never thought I would be doing before I got this job. But like, it's been a wonderful year of like evolution and growth for me, definitely. And I actually have a completely different perspective on the drinks industry as a whole.
Oh, I'm sure you have. I mean, Coco's been doing this for some. Coco, meet Stephanie. Stephanie, meet Coco.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Pleasure meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
Coco's in Berlin. Stephanie's in Ireland. I'm here in New York City. And I'm sure Coco can relate. Your job as a brand ambassador is constantly evolving. You never know what things you have to it's one of the reasons why I created this show is like, I don't think most people had the understanding what a brand ambassador role was. And it's different for everybody and for every company. And even within the same company and brand in different countries. But the fact of how complex the role can actually be, because you're constantly learning new skill sets. Coco, would you agree? You've been doing this for a while.
Well, it is evolving daily. I don't think that the first wave, the first generation of brand ambassadors that I've met when I just started working in a bar did the same job that we're doing today. It evolved. It became a little bit more serious, a little bit more professional, but I don't think it lost any of its magic. That's the most important.
I think that's
aspect.
true. It's all
So,
expense accounts, so that always keeps the magic going. But it is a little
well,
more serious. It's become a career. There used to be the question of, okay, what do I do now? Like, if you can only be a brand ambassador for a certain period of time, and then the next role was to become a senior brand ambassador, and then maybe director of advocacy. But I'm seeing a lot of people move into different roles within the corporation if they want to, because that option, companies are taking the role more seriously as something that's really, I think William Grant's always has. Charlotte's always been a person who embodied that role and has really showcased it to what a brand ambassador company should be, and what you really do. All of the brand ambassadors from William Grant's really do embody in advocacy, like about building that connection between the brand and the bartender, which is really special. That's why you get to do all these crazy events, which we were about to talk about. We were just talking about. And we're going to, Coco, I do want to get, because we were talking about, Coco, let's finish your story. And then Stephanie, I do have a question for you. So Coco, you were telling us a story because Stephanie, Coco was telling us about how he got into the role of brand ambassador, but what he was doing beforehand, because he was doing a couple of different things. He did things not just behind the bar, he also worked the floor a lot. So Coco, go for it. I maybe start from the beginning again, like how you got into the world of hospitality.
you want to know how I got into the world of hospitality? All right. So, I mean, I guess it's when I really left Berlin to move to London. It was my second Berlin bar convent at Steiger Lee. The place was full with bartenders from all over the world, brand ambassadors from all over the world. And I had a lot of attitudes, and there were a lot of intoxicated ladies and gentlemen in there. And I had my bowler hat with my peacock feather and my riding boots and my lipstick on. And I was super sassy and running around telling people off. And one of them, a very handsome Frenchman called Vincent Marino, today he owns a bar in Brooklyn called Lucy Rouge. He asked me if I'd like to work for him in a new bar in London, the Experimental Cocktail Club. I told him that it's never going to happen. I never leave my hometown, and I would certainly never ever work for a Frenchman. A week later, I was in Hamburg visiting my boyfriend at that time, and I found his business card in my pocket. I called him, apologized, and asked if the job was still available. So a few weeks later, my friends bought me a ticket to London for the interview. We separated at the airport. It was super cold. It was raining. I had my finest and most dapper suit on. I remember I had like a burgundy velvet hat with a feather on. It was raining, cats and dogs, and all my friends, they took my luggage and they went to Shoreditch to meet me after the interview at our friend's place, where I had no idea where this friend lived. I wrote it in my phone. It was 2011. Wi-Fi wasn't available all over town. It was, but it was super expensive. So I went to town, met the boys of ECC together with Nico, got interviewed, got the job, by the way. Spoiler alert. And when I left the cafe, I realized my phone was stolen. You know, I was super lost. I didn't know what to do. It was raining. I was for the very first time in my life in London, and I didn't know where my friends were. So I thought the only possible solution to this problem was to look for people I know in town. And the only person in town I knew was a global brand ambassador called John Gakuru, representing Sagashiba Cachaça at that time. She was a superstar, at least in Germany. So I went from bar to bar in Soho asking, do you know John Gakuru? And most of them said, I've never heard of John Gakuru, until I found one spot that knew John, but haven't had his details. They sent me to a members club called Cuvadis, where I was allowed inside, got a seat at the bar. I told them what happened. I told them that I was looking for John. They called John. He came over from West London to take care of me. I gave him the full story. And actually, I mean, that was 10 years ago. Because we talked about it yesterday. I still have it. John took a little napkin from the Cuvadis and wrote down to a lady called Andrea, back at the day, bar manager at the Kalukale. Dear Andrea, meet my friend Coco. He's had his phone stolen and is in the weeds. His mates live in Shoreditch. Please get him a few drinks and send him to the George and Dragon, which was, well, later on my favorite gay pub in Shoreditch. Pretty cool. So I did. I went to Shoreditch. I met Andrea. She got me a few drinks. Eventually later, I found my friends. I got the job. I moved to London, and that's how I got into hospitality, I guess. But yes, to answer
That's
your
also
question,
hospitality at its best. I mean, John was showing what a brand ambassadors can do, like being the person who comes and rescues people and hosts people in their towns. I think is really quite special.
I never planned to become a brand ambassador, but I always admired brand ambassadors at the time, especially that first wave of people like Angus Winchester, Michael Menegos, Davide Cordoba, John Gakuru, Xavier Padovani. I really looked up to these guys because, I mean, of course, they had fancy expense accounts, but they also traveled the world. They knew everyone. They were everywhere. I was meeting them or them coming to the bar, Ian Burrell, coming to a bar. That was a big deal. But I never planned on it. I always wanted to become a bartender. And you mentioned me being on the floor.
Yeah.
I tried really hard to jump behind the bar, but for some reason, the bar managers that worked with me, they thought I wasn't ready. And at some point, when I was, applying a little bit of pressure, I think it was Xavier Padovani back at ECC London who said, "Look, I'm super happy to have the boys and girls train you to become a bartender, but I really believe that you have way more talent to be on the floor." I had good energy. I was good with people. He said that the amount of complaints equaled the amount of compliments on Yelp. That was the only reason they didn't fire me on the spot.
I was going to say, because considering how you were in Berlin, how you told off the French guy, yeah, exactly. So
yeah, there is a certain Berlin attitude that I always apply. But I believe that being on the floor for so many years really helped me to become a better brand ambassador. Because one of the reasons why I particularly wasn't very good behind the bar is I'm not very good at multitasking. And I got very, very nervous and started to panic as soon as there were more than 2 or 3 tickets in front of me. But that's very different on the floor. As soon as the room is packed, this is where I start to function. This is where the fun begins. And you develop a certain instinct for people who wants to be left alone, who wants to be entertained, who wants to go all the way nerdy deep into detail, who just wants like some very, very simple facts. Who wants something fancy, who wants something simple. And I think building on this instinct, that gut feeling for people and situations is what helped me to working with Hendrix, not only translating this brand world into reality, but also translating this Victorian surrealism from Great Britain into a very different German culture. That was, I believe, one of my largest challenges. So without having the experience with people, I don't think I could have done it. And just saying, like, being a great bartender and being a great waiter or a great host requires completely different skill sets.
No, absolutely. Well, one of I think the skill sets of a brand ambassador and many people have to learn, I hear a lot of people say they struggle with this, is learning or a hard lesson that they learn on the job is learning to cater your message to the audience that you're with, and to knowing, and also that, different buyers, like people that you interact with, as you said, like they want different information, like just like the customer wants a different experience. So they want the full like show of Coco being Coco, or they just want to be like sat down, very strict, like, whatever it may be. And being a brand ambassador, being able to have that skill set of like when you meet the buyer for the first time and have that conversation, like, oh, this is a person who just wants hard facts. They don't want the story, they don't care. And then there are people who want the romance. They want to be brought into that world. And as you said, translating the Hendrix message into a German mindset is also a different
challenging
set. Because I think every country, right? You have different types of people who are going to take that message a little bit different. So I never even thought about that, but about adapting it to the culture, not just the people. That's a pretty unique thing. Didn't you say yesterday you had to like translate like a message for some, like your brand team? You do a lot of that as well. You translate.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I help. So very often the language Hendrix Gin's using is quite particular. It's very quirky and playful, and translating that into German is sometimes quite hard because sometimes there isn't a word for it.
Yeah.
But over the years, I I think I have a very close relationship with the brand. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Christina.
Actually, I mean, Constantine is my real name. Everyone calls me Coco, and the reason everyone calls me Coco is when I moved to London and later New York, no one could actually say Constantine, so it took me forever. Coco is easier.
That's very cool. Well, Stephanie, you also have a very interesting story and an adventure in your life that, like, I took it off your bio, and we talked about a little bit yesterday, which involved you going off to China to join a military school voluntarily.
Yep.
By the way, I want to remind you up. You know, can you just, there was a specific time in your life why you chose to do this, and then like how it impacted your life and now your career now?
So, just a little bit of background.
Yeah.
I have been working in cocktail bars for about 10 years at this point. So, you know, I'm very much, I would consider myself a workhorse. I was always really like, I needed to know everything. So as soon as I discovered that cocktails were a thing, it was just like, I need to know everything that, like, you know, I need to know all the classics. I need to know all the variations, but I also need to know why this particular dash extra changes everything. So I started to get really, really into kind of flavor and the science of it. And so that was I was like a blinkered horse. I was just like, I just need to know everything that I can about this. So I worked really, really hard. I mean, it's a tough industry. It's a wonderful industry. Oh, hi, Ben. It's a great industry and I love it. But I had like 10 years where I felt like I was kind of like, you know, like this blinkered horse that was kind of running almost aimlessly towards this one singularity. And as happens to a lot of people, you know, when you're working, you know, 12 plus hour shifts day after day, year upon year, it wears on you a little bit. So I had a moment where I was like, I think I'm suffering from burnout and I need to just take a little break. So it was like, you know, I could have probably gone to Greece or like gone to Spain and like spent some time on an island in the sun. And I was like, you know what? I really want to go live up a mountain. Like, you know, like those really old movies from like the 80s where they have like, they actually had like kung fu and it's like some kid goes up a mountain and it's just a load of monks and it's all serene. I was like, I think this is exactly what I need in my life. So
so much
my dad
about
is
you. That's the first.
Yeah, it's like this is it. This is it. So
I chose to
my
go
dad
to
is Chinese
Spain
Malay.
when I like had to burnt out. I spent like 2 weeks in Hardline and like learned
I'm
about
like,
sharing.
you absolutely, like, you could do that, or you could just like pluck something random from like a TV show from the 80s that was in your brain, and you're like, you know what, this could be really cool. I mean, it could go terribly wrong, but like, let's check it out. So, my dad is Chinese Malay. So my family are based primarily in Malaysia. And I was like, I could go to Malaysia, but I've already been there. I know my family and it would just be kind of like a family catch up. I really felt the need to do something that was completely independent. It was like, I'm not doing this, you know, to potentially further my career. I'm not doing this to spend time with someone else. I really just wanted to have something that was purely driven by me without any real particular goal other than to just do it. So I Googled living up a mountain in China, which like it's totally normal.
As
and I found yeah, I mean, like, I'm sure many people
Coco, you do that, right?
it.
Hey, living in a mountain in China. It's something I Google like every other day.
Yeah. Really common. So I found a school. Well, it actually was also quite interesting because you have to kind of pick away what the scams are versus what the schools are. Because there's a lot of people that are like, yes, we'll bring you up a mountain, but you have to be careful about who you're going up mountains with. So I found what I thought was what seemed like a legitimate school. And on the English website, it was, so on the English website, it was like Yun Taishan's International School for Kung Fu and Cultural Center. So on their website, they're like, we do Kung Fu, but we also teach you Mandarin Chinese. We do calligraphy, you know, we do flower arranging. We do, you know, Buddhist classes. It was sold to me as like a holistic 360. This is everything that's like super cool about Chinese culture all in one. And then I arrive in the mountain and they're like, oh yeah, we did that class that one time, like 3 years ago. We're like, actually, it's a military school. And I was like, so I arrived. And I'm like, sorry, what? And they're like, yeah, you have to get up at 5:30 every morning. And like, if you're late for class, you're doing push-ups. And I was like, where's the flower arranging? Where's the calligraphy?
Where's the cocktails? Where's the flowers?
Yeah, what
Where's
is
my
this?
meditation?
So the first day that I arrived, they were like, so obviously I arrived, I think around 3 a.m. because you have to fly into China. So I think I landed in Shanghai, and then you have to go from Shanghai all the way out to Henan, and then you have to drive another like 3 hours because it really is the middle of nowhere. Like there are no international tourists. There's only Chinese people there. Very few people speak English. And it was really what I wanted. I wanted to completely like get away from everything and just throw myself into something crazy. So first day, I arrived there around 3 a.m. and they were like, look, we know you've had a long journey, so we're going to let you sleep in. I was like, thank you so much. They were like, we'll get you at 7. And I was like, in the a.m.?
Wow.
And they were like, yeah, normally you'd be getting up at 5:30, but like, we'll be here at 7. I was like, okay, thank you. So like, I swear, 1 minute to 7, there's a knock on the door. I still have a toothbrush in my mouth and my eyes are glued shut. And I'm like, hello? And they're like, oh, it's time for you to train now. I'm like, oh, okay. So they bring me up. And then the school is like, there's a school up the mountain and then there's like giant walls around it. So they bring me outside of the walls and they're like, today you're going to run in the mountains. And I'm like completely unprepared for this. I'm like, okay, that's cool. They're like, yeah, there's a trail. You can just run on it. And I'm like, any directions? Do I go to a certain point? When do I turn around? They were like, oh, it does fork at one point. So don't go left. You have to stay right. And I was like, okay, cool. So what happens if I go left? Oh, you'll get shot.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what? They were like, yeah, so there's actually a military base, and if you turn left, you're technically on their land, and they'll probably shoot you. Like, good to know.
Welcome to China.
Should have emphasized that before we left the walls of the building. But it was just the most insane experience. Like, getting up at 5:30 every minute of my day was, dedicated to something specific. I had insane routine that, when you work in a bar, it's almost like the complete opposite. Everything's so relaxed and like, you have your shifts and it's almost like you've got this kind of like, super chill, and then you go crazy for this very specific amount of time, but your days off are going to vary wildly week per week. You could have a shift that's 12 hours long. You could have a shift that's 14, maybe 8 if you're like having an easy day. But this was like 6 days a week. You're getting up at 5:30 a.m. You're working really hard. If you're not working, they're like poking you with sticks. Like I had in my first week, I had one of the shifus punching me in the stomach. Wow. Because I tried to do a sit-up and he was like, that's not a very good sit-up. And I'm like, I do not have the physical capacity to do sit-ups. I'm like, I've never done this before in my life. So he's like, okay, cool. Just keep trying. And basically punched me in the stomach. And I was like, why are you punching me in the stomach? And he was like, because it'll build up your stomach muscles faster. By the time I left, I was doing like hundreds of sit-ups a day. Like it was insane.
Shape. How long did you stay there? And voluntarily, you stayed there for how long?
So originally I was supposed to stay there for a year, but when I arrived, I was like, I just have a visa for 3 months, and they were like, yeah, that's fine, we'll renew it. But for some reason in Ireland, when I got my visa, they gave me a family visa. So because I do technically have family that live in China, but they're really far removed. They're like my grandfather's cousins or something. And so somehow when I applied for my visa, even though I specifically put in all the paperwork for the school for a student visa, in the visa office, they were like, oh, well, she's clearly Chinese, so we'll just put family. So the only way for me to get an extended visa was to have someone impersonate a family member, which is really just not a thing you want to do in China, or leave. So like the school were supposed to extend my visa. I ended up only staying for 3 months. Because they were like, there's literally nothing we can do. So I would have had to go all the way back to Ireland, start the process for application again, get approved a second time, and then go back over. So then I was just like, oh gosh, I think I'll just go take a really extended holiday. So one of the people I met in the school was like, oh, I'm going to be traveling around Thailand for a month. So I was like, I guess I'll just do that too. So I just like booked a flight like a week later. I was like, I guess I'm going to Thailand for a month.
That must have been so pleasurable after spending 3 months in a military school. Everything must seem better now. Everything compared to that, like you just have to compare it to that and be like, this is better. Even if it's shit, you're like, it's still better than that.
I really was quite a fussy eater before I went. So I've always been a fussy eater, but I was particularly like, I was really like anti-vegetable. You know, I was just like, I'm meat. I'm the meat person. I want to be a carnivore, maybe some carbs, but like, I like meat. Went to China and it was like, when I left the mountain and I went to Shanghai, when I was connecting the flight, it's like, so broccoli is the greatest thing in the world because we hadn't had fresh vegetables for like 3 months. So suddenly I was like, oh my God, I'm craving all of this really natural, delicious food. Hi, Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan wants to know about the school.
So the school is called Yuntai Shan. So it's Yuntai. And honestly, it is one of the most beautiful places in the world. So the school is actually on the mountain that contains the highest geographical beauty index holder. There's apparently an index for how geographically beautiful something is. And this particular mountain has like the highest rank that you can get. That's not where I was staying. You have to travel another like 40 minutes to get to that really pretty part. But it should be quite easy to find. And I would recommend it for everyone. I think everyone should have a random up a mountain trip, a safe random mountain trip. It doesn't necessarily have to be in China. Yeah, just to have that time alone and I think the military aspect really like kind of shocked my system because I had spent so many years having this kind of like loose and like, you know, everything's really flexible when you're working in bars because it's always kind of a little bit wild and you're like, yeah, it's all chaotic and you go with the flow. And then suddenly it's like every minute of your day is like scheduled. And at one point I was like, I feel like a hamster in a wheel, but it was really beneficial for my mental health, obviously my physical health. And yeah, as you said, everything is so much easier now. Life is just so much easier.
Well, I was gonna say, and that also building on that, it's like, and Coco, I'm sure you can relate to this, is that, you know, one of the things I always hear when I interview people is, you know, the hardest thing from switching from being behind the bar, working in a bar, and then becoming a brand ambassador is the lack of schedule. And like not having, like somebody's always made your schedule for you. And now you actually have to create your own schedule, you know, every single day, every single week. So, you know, I'm assuming this experience has helped you to become maybe easier, or because they did it for you, you're still not good at it. I don't know.
I will say that I now own a watch. So Mountain in China, I had a very loose grasp of time. I was like, I don't need a watch. The universe will tell me where I need to go. Now I have a watch and I actually use Google Calendar. So like, I wouldn't say that I'm particularly skilled at organizing my time, but definitely much better.
Much better. Coco, is that something you struggle with? Like when you went from one job into another?
I am incredibly unorganized. Always been. I've never. I mean, your experience sounds spectacular. Wow. I have pictures in my head, like in a movie. No. I've always struggled with organizing myself. I work really, really well under pressure. As you know, I think that's how hospitality works. Is I remember so many times being in a bar and there weren't any guests, and my manager said, "Well, why don't you do anything? Like, dust off some bottles, clean some tables. It's nothing to do." But in fact, you get really, really tired when there's nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Once the place was popping, full of people, it's the best time in a bar is on the weekend between 11 and 1 or 2 a.m. when it's busy. You or your fellow bartenders and colleagues, they're running around. It feels amazing. You feel so alive, and this is where I start to like, you know, this is where my body activates. And as a brand ambassador, a former colleague of mine once said, brand ambassadors are lone wolves. You know, we do make our own schedule. We usually travel on our own, and it's a tough gig to make your own schedule. It's a tough gig to decide to prioritize what's important. Now, me personally, I'm getting KPIs, horrible marketing term.
Yeah.
They tell me what they want to see by the end of the year, but they don't really tell me how to get there. So I have to come up. And there are periods where I'm incredibly busy, where I work every single day, where I spend 5, 6, sometimes 10 days on the road. But Sometimes I take a longer weekend,
Yeah. No,
make myself
it's thing. I
nice
mean,
and
have you
cozy,
guys ever
comfortable
had
at
that
home.
panic when you didn't get an email that day from anybody telling you anything to do or asking things? Am I getting fired because nobody's asked me to do anything for a couple of days now? I've heard that from a few people. Have you ever felt that, Steph? Like, you ever
Oh,
panicked?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so like because I like have never fully experienced the global brand ambassador role.
That's true.
Like I got hired in December in 2019 and then had all of my onboarding, all of my training. My first ever trip was to Russia, which was wild because it was the first time I did an in-person masterclass and I had an interpreter, and that obviously adds to the pressure of what you're doing. And also you're in Russia. I mean, I had never been to Russia before. It's wild.
Mhm.
And then I went straight from Russia into America right as the coronavirus hit.
Yes.
And then suddenly I get a phone call.
I'm gonna hold you that. Like,
Huh?
yeah, this is the beginning. This is how you started your job, right? This is like your first couple weeks. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the pandemic is happening. Yeah, tell us this. So
Yeah,
now you're in America.
So I land in America. I land in Seattle, and one of my colleagues meets me at the airport, and he's like, thank you so much. It means so much that you came out. Not many people would. And I was kind of like, why? What do you mean not many people would? Why would nobody want to come out to Seattle? And he's like, oh, have you not heard? And I was like, heard what? And he's like, yeah, we're the epicenter for COVID in the US. And I was just like, oh God. It's like, do I turn around now? What do I do? I'm already off the plane. Oh, just smile and continue on. So I went over for Seattle Cocktail Week, and there was loads of events lined up. I was super, super pumped. And then they all got cancelled. So like even between the airport and the car, there was like 2 events that were cancelled just in that time frame. So we did have a couple of tastings, but like, it was kind of like really random places, random times. People weren't showing up because no one knew, are you supposed to go outside? Are you supposed to stay home and isolate? Are the bars going to close? And it was just really, really odd. And I was like, well, this is a strange beginning to my wonderful global brand ambassador journey. After Seattle, I was supposed to go to New York. And I'm like, you know what? New York will be different. I land in New York and they're like, everything is canceled. And I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. So then like I get a phone call from my boss and she's like, you need to get on a flight like right now, like ASAP. And I was like, oh my gosh, is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, we've just had word that they're going to like shut down the airports and stop travel. So you need to get home like right now. So that's how I started my brand ambassador journey.
I such a crazy entryway into the job. Thank goodness you got home. I definitely know a few people who got stuck in different countries. And so I'm going to jump in because I also want to talk about how your job evolved during COVID. But for you, because I want to talk about how that's now impacting us going forward. So Coco, like, what did you do? Like, how did you get involved during the pandemic? Like, what did you do, like, to keep your brand alive, keep your job going? Like, what was your kind of involvement there?
That was a tough gig, I have to say. The brand ambassador lives off the personal interaction with bartenders, the trade, and all of a sudden I'm stuck at home in my apartment with a computer and a camera. And personally, I've seen some really spectacular online programs, both educational and entertaining, some really incredible stuff that I enjoyed, but I realized that wasn't really me. And what we did, I was very, very fortunate and privileged that Hendrix, Gin, and William Grant & Sons gave me a certain amount of freedom to take up on other responsibilities. So what we did is I gathered a group of brand ambassadors, pretty much every single brand ambassador from Germany, from both my company and all other companies. We all came together and we started an initiative called Support Your Local Bar that over the course of the pandemic collected 3 million euros to be distributed among bars across the country. And that was quite a humbling experience, working with representatives of Pernod Ricard, Diageo, Bacardi, together as if we were one team. Something that never happened before, never happened after. And this is something we talked about yesterday, the responsibility of the drinks industry for the bar community that goes beyond just selling bottles.
No, I think that's amazing. I didn't realize you did that. We didn't have a chance to talk about that part of the job, that all the brand ambassadors, different companies got together. That's really lovely. And you're right. And this is something I would love you to expand about, like your philosophy on how you think the drinks industry has a responsibility for the bar industry, because I think that ties into a lot of what you do for the brand. So expand on that, what you think about that.
So usually when you think of advocacy programs, tastings, distillery trips, events, etc., a lot of people would assume that the main goal of these activations, as they say in marketing, again, a horrible marketing term, is to win the hearts of new customers, sell more bottles and convince more people that your brand is the only one worth serving, buying, drinking. But the reality is that a lot of people in this community already work with those products. So, and work very hard, tough hours, 5 to 6 days a week at night, and have very limited access to, well, everyday stuff like going to the movies or going to brunch. And I always try not only to, win over new people, but predominantly show my appreciation to those that already work with Hendrix Gin. Say thank you for your support over all these years. This is for you. This is my way to say thank you. This is our brand's way to say thank you for all the hard work and thank you for having us on your back bar and on your mind. Yeah.
No, I think that's,
and giving them the opportunity to be part of something that they usually can't. Considering that bartenders come to see you on their day off while they can go see their friends or just chill on the couch, that's a massive compliment. That's incredible.
No, I think that is I like that way of thinking about it. It's true. It's that we're privileged that they're coming to see us on their day off because they do work so hard. And I think that's a great, healthy way of looking at it. It's not like, some people like, oh, we spoil, like, I'm like, no, we're not spoiling them. We're treating them to something because they do work so hard because it's such a hard job. So I think that's, I really like thinking of it that way. So thank you for that.
And, it's okay to spoil them. I love to spoil bartenders because most brand ambassadors come from the bar and a lot of them will return to the bar. So I love to be spoiled when I was going on brand trips in my time in bars. And I always loved to spoil my guests when I was working on the floor. I always wanted to make sure that, I wanted them to leave a big tip and I wanted them to leave a lot of money at the bar, of course. But I always wanted them to go home and say, I had an amazing time at that place. I'm definitely going to go back. And if you love hospitality, if you love being a host, then being a brand ambassador is no different. You want to make sure that your guests, that the bartenders that you work with or come to see you at the distillery or to your event, that they have the bestest time, that they're going to tell all their friends about it. That's really, really, really important to me.
No, I think that it is. And that's the way you build out. It's the things you can't measure because you can't measure that, right? But you know it. And you see it, it's just something that's what advocacy is supposed to be about. It's about building those connections. And that's why you're not a salesperson. You're a brand ambassador because you're building that advocacy and love between your brand and them and you and them as well. And that's something that can't be measured, but it's priceless. And worth is priceless. It's what that connection is because they will always remember that experience. And no matter what bar they work in, they're going to carry your brand if they had that great experience. It carries throughout their career because they'll remember those moments when you spoiled them and took care of them. Or else they're cunts, then maybe that won't happen. But if they're not, then, then maybe they're not. And there's always a few in there. No matter what you do or do, it doesn't matter. They're just like, but most bartenders and people in the hospitality industry are not. And that's why we love this industry, right? As a whole. Stephanie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, my experience is really, really limited, but it meant that I essentially came directly from the bar into this role, and then suddenly COVID happened, and I felt really, really, and I'm still really thankful that I've still had a job throughout this whole time. So at the very beginning of lockdown, I came back from the US, and it was a case of like, at any moment I could not have a job. And that's that's part and parcel of what's going on. So the very kind of, I tried to do like as much as I could while I still had the role. So I basically like, the first week that I was home, there was like a form that you had to fill out if you wanted to get government support. But for some reason, they made it mandatory. It had to be printed out and then posted because we're really backwards, and apparently email doesn't exist in Ireland. So I went to the office, I printed out like hundreds of these forms, and then I hand delivered to like any bartender, or even if you weren't a bartender. It was like, if you're a bartender and you're living with a lot of people that don't have these forms, and then I like, made a load of little mini cocktails because I was like, oh, this is a pretty grim time. We don't know what's going to happen. So hand delivered everything all very safely with like gloves and like social distancing. And then after about a week or two, when everyone had kind of organized their pay, and it looked like, because initially it was supposed to be 2 weeks to stop the curve. And then suddenly here we are.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit more than 2 weeks. So I was like, I swear, like I spent I would say the first 6 months of lockdown where I was like, I'm going to lose my job. Not for any other reason then. It's just what's happening globally right now.
You're not alone. A lot of brand ambassadors had that fear. They're like, why are they paying me? I'm not really doing anything.
Yeah. So it's definitely, and there's also like all of my friends are bartenders. Like, I had only just transitioned into this whole new world. Everyone I know is a bartender. Everyone I know is out of work. And here's me working away. And I'm brand new at this. And I was like, oh gosh. So I organized surprise boxes for bartenders. So I partnered with kind of the Bartender Project, which is a fantastic project. It's run by an Irish guy called Tom O'Brien. So he has, and it's been running for quite a few years. He offers kind of free photography and free videos for people who are in the drinks industry. So you don't have to necessarily work with a brand to get a video. He's just kind of wants to help grow the Irish hospitality industry. He's phenomenal. So partnered with him and our local fruit supplier, and we just put together care packages where we like had protein bars and soups and inspirational notes and obviously some whiskey. But like we tried to put together these boxes, and I was like, every time I did something, I was like, this could be the last thing that I do. But if my role has only been 3 months long, at least I know that I did what I needed to do. And was like made beneficial use of my time. And then for fantastic. But for some insane reason, they kept me on. So, I mean,
they kept you on. Well, this is what I tell people, because if you haven't worked on, and I've had the pleasure of working on both sides where I've had to hire people and I've been the person hired. And the one thing I have learned, and I tell so many people this, it's when a company hires you, they've taken a long time to find you. So most of the time, they're not going to get rid of you very quickly, because it will take just as much money and time that it would cost them to pay you than it would to hire another person 8 months down the line. So it's very hard to get fired if you're decent at your job and they took that long to find you. So just something to always find comfort in that. But I know you also did a lot, and I want to talk about this because I think this is a trend, and I would love to hear the two of your opinion. This is my opinion, and I would love to see if it's your opinion, that things like Zoom tastings and interactions are still going to continue going forward, even as we start to do more in-person things. So I think it's going to be a combo. That's my thought, because it's easy to scale. Like you could do 6 countries at the same time. You could do 50 bars, very easily and very cheaply, right? You can do these more engaging things. But I know, Stephanie, this was something you had to do a lot of master classes online. So is there anything you learned, like some best practices you learned, like some fuck ups that you had when you realized I should not do that? And then like things going forward, you're like, okay, now I know how to do it this way. What was some hard lessons you learned?
I feel like the hardest thing is to kind of so obviously for me, the buildup was to start actually doing the job I was hired for. So I managed to do 2 master classes, one with an interpreter and one to a room of 2 people because of the coronavirus. So then I transitioned from this into complete virtual, digital, online only. And I think you have to be adaptive. There's a very different kind of presence that you need to have when you're in person, and then there's a different presence that you need to have when you're online, because when you're around a lot of people, there's almost like this osmosis of energy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're super energetic, then the crowd feed that back to you, and there's this constant movement of energy, and everyone gets energized, and it's a really exciting thing. When you're virtual and you have 80% of the people with no camera on, you're like, I could be screaming out into the void, like, is anyone listening? I'm not 100% sure. And suddenly the entire, like, the energy of the whole event, like, all of that is sitting on you. Like, you are essentially the person that has to maintain interest, energy levels, pacing. You become much more aware of, like, little breaks in what you're saying, and trying to be more aware of, like, okay, clearly this isn't, you have to read even faster than you would in person, be like, this is not the crowd that want to hear about that one time that this random thing happened in the distillery. This is the crowd that want to know why this whiskey is named this. It's you have to be really adaptive, but I feel like once you've done a few, you kind of feel your flow. Definitely.
Gotcha. I think that's a good thing. Coco, did you have to do any of those when you were?
I had some online thingies happening, but not really tastings. What I did, I guess 50% of my job when I'm not doing events is I literally just go from bar to bar and visit people all over Germany. So I organized kind of what we're doing now, little rooms with people that were close with each other from all over the country, and try to make sure they stay in touch as well. Give people a platform to interact. And Stephanie, I'm with you 100%. It's such a painful experience to look at a dark screen, not knowing if anyone is there. They might be sleeping, they might be, out with their friends, and you're just talking to an empty room. That is quite frustrating. And you remember what I said about people working in bars? It's pretty much the same as being on a stage. When a performer is on stage, if the room is packed, if there are like 200 people in the audience, it really gives you a lot of gasoline, a lot of energy, lots of, but if there's no one, you lose, it's hard to concentrate. It's so hard to perform. Same goes for talking into a camera. So I do.
Did you learn any
and
tricks
what you were
how to keep people engaged? Is there anything that you guys might have learned doing this, like that, like you found worked? Like there was, like, I know some people say that I just concentrate on one person who seems to be really engaging with me. I know my secret trade was I would pretend that people ask questions in the chat. So I'd be like, Joe, that was such a good, and you'd see like Joe like, and you'd be like, what? And I'd be like, Joe, like, that was such a great question. Joe, everybody, if you didn't see, Joe just asked like blah, blah, blah. And then people started really paying attention. They were like, oh crap,
you know what?
call on me next. And it really,
I didn't prepare anything today. Sorry.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
No, you go ahead.
No, as I said, that was it. Like, that was like one thing I learned. I was like, I just learned to have fun with it because I realized it was really draining. So I started like almost torturing the people on the other side. I'm like, well, you're not going to pay attention to me. I'm going to make you pay attention. So I just started calling on people randomly and asking questions. And I did see people, I did cocktail classes, and people would bring in entertainment. So they would have, they would have a comedian. They had one guy, come in and do like magic. Like they had different, like, people got really good at finding entertainers to bring into the Zoom kind of classes. So it'd be like 15 minutes of cocktails, 10 minutes of like the comedian telling a show or magic show, whatever. I saw people getting very creative. Well, I guess the question is, do you think any of that will continue? I mean, it sounds like you both hated it, and I get it. But I do know people like Gemma Cole, who works on a whiskey brand out inside. She's like, I do 4 tastings a day on Zoom. Like, she's like, she was crushing it. She's like, I do this. She's like, I could never do this in real life. And they were very successful for her. They were a lot of corporation tastings they were doing. Like, and she said, and she was pregnant at the time. She's like, so it's great for me. She's like, yeah. I'm 9 months pregnant. She's like, so I just sit here and I can just do these all day. But do you see them continuing? Do you think this will be something that will be that's going to be part of a strategy for engagement going forward? Or are you like, nope, can't wait to get rid of it? What do you think?
I personally think it's definitely going to be more of a hybrid moving forward, and I think there's a lot of benefits to the virtual aspect. So, cost is obviously, I mean, as little as we like to talk about it, like we're supposed to be the super cool ones that like don't talk about money or marketing terms, but we are now half in that world. So the cost element is definitely going to kind of keep some elements of it, so that, if they're like, hey, in Australia, we want to engage this bar, do we necessarily need to fly you all the way to Australia just for this one tasting? Are they going to try and like scramble to put together like, reasons for you to go to Australia? Or is it easier to just be like, hey, actually, if you have a couple of hours on this day, there's this tasting, and it would really help us out.
Yeah.
But I think the other benefit to it is something that, like Dead Rabbit is a much smaller brand than Hendrix is. Like Hendrix, like you guys are a huge household name, and that's amazing. But we have we have a very different perspective on everything than, like Hendrix would. So for us, definitely, it helps us to engage more meaningfully. So, like I've been actually spending a lot of time with like bars in like, for example, like in Poland or in Russia. And I wouldn't necessarily get to spend a huge amount of time in person there. But it means that, with the virtual element, it means that, we can like regularly kind of like be in touch. And if there's a bar that, maybe it wouldn't be worth it to kind of travel all the way out to Poland and then go all the way out to like Key, which is like a random tiny place in Lodz, like go there. It's like, that's not necessarily going to be on your plan.
So for you now, if you just like send bottle like product and then that you kind of arrange like a tasting and then you guys can just engage online. Yeah, that's definitely cheaper than
so it means yeah, it's cheaper, but it also enables you to get in contact with more like rural or hard to reach bars that maybe don't get a lot of love. So I think that that's a massive benefit, is that it isn't completely 100% going to be centered, which it usually has to be, because it's the most efficient way to build your brand on, the high impact, like really well-known cocktail bars, which is great. I love to give love to those bars, but it also is beneficial for all brands, I think, to have this virtual element, because you can access other bars that may have been inaccessible before.
I love that. That's such a great way of looking at it. Coco, for you. And I also love the fact getting the smaller bars that most people don't give love to. They probably loving it. It's like, hey, we could do this virtually because you're so far, but like, and they probably are so grateful for the interaction that somebody's giving them some love. Coco, what do you think? Hybrid?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be hybrid. Sometimes I insist on being there in person. Sometimes I know that certain things do not work over the phone or in a Zoom meeting, but absolutely, if it's something that can be done virtually and I don't have to jump on a train, I don't have to drive for several amount of hours. Now, especially working for a brand like Hendrix Gin gives me the privilege that we are a team of, oh gosh, I think 15 or 16 brand ambassadors globally. Wow. Additionally, we have our fearless leader, our global brand ambassador, Mr. Ellie Martin. In Ireland, it is our lovely Ben Curtis with us tonight as well. Thank you, Ben, for being here. Love you, man.
Yay, Ben!
So yeah, some of us been around for quite some time. We're very, very close as a team. So the global brand ambassador can rely on the national brand ambassadors to cover even the smallest towns, the smallest cities. What's really, really interesting about Germany is that the now again, a horrible marketing word, the on-trade. So the bar community is spread all over the country. We have 6 major metropolitan hubs, which are Berlin, Munich, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Düsseldorf, Cologne. And then you have like so many small cities and towns in between that are home to some of the most spectacular bars in the country and maybe even the world. And that's quite challenging, going everywhere, because you can't be everywhere at the same time. There's no way you can manage all of the bars in the country. In 2018, I have visited 250 bars in 1 year.
Wow.
That was when I looked at that number by the end, I said, "Wow, good job, Coco." But I need a break.
Like, high five, Coco.
So But I've seen a lot. But I can tell you, I really, really appreciated home time after that. So yeah, I think it really is how you manage it. If you find the right mix of virtual and personal, it's this is the way to go. This is a very sustainable way of being a brand ambassador. It gives you, um, you as a brand manager, you also have to manage your energy and your time.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to burn out. I've Usually the first year is when most brand ambassadors, after the first year, most brand ambassadors leave. If they made the first year, you know they're here to stay. And it is a tough gig, but it can be so much fun. It can be so incredibly rewarding if you know how to manage your time, how to manage your energy, if you know how much sleep you need, if you know when to say no, even to your leaders, even to your management, saying, "Look, that's not going to happen. This is too much. This is not going to work." But at some point, you learn, and then things. This is when things start to be fun.
Is there anything
When everything
you,
is just
Coco?
runs smoothly.
So
Sorry.
you're saying about saying no, managing your time, making sure you get plenty of sleep. I know some brand ambassadors have rituals, like some have a morning routine that always keeps them, even when they're on the road. They do certain things before they get out in the world. I think saying no is definitely a major one. Learning how to say no, but coming back with an alternative. That's what I like. The key best practice I've seen from a lot of people is like, if I say no, but I present an alternative, because I don't know about you, but I always found that one of the reasons why I had to say no is because I started realizing that I was the first person on somebody's call list to ask to do an event, and there were just some events that were just a waste of my time. I'm like, you don't need somebody at my caliber. Not to say I was this amazing person, but they were paying me a certain amount of money, right? And it's like, my time is money. I was like, you could be paying me to do this event that literally it's at a nobody's, like a tiny little liquor store in the middle of nowhere, that we could send a really well-educated promotional model. Or you could send me, and like, that's 5 hours of my day that I could have been spending working on marketing strategy or presenting to an account that's really big and important, or working with a distributor, and so I had to learn to like just kind of kindly say, like, hey, thank you so much for asking me. I think actually a better person for this would be this person, because I have this other thing going on, and presenting alternatives, and realizing most of them are like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. You really shouldn't be doing that. I realized. I was like, okay, because I'm not trying to sound like I'm not a team player, but this is just at this stage not the thing I should be doing. There's many other people that can be doing this job, and I realize you called me because I'm the first person on the list. And for most of us, if you're the person that they know, you're the first person on the list because you're like the senior person. I don't know if you've experienced that, like, about saying no. Do you have any solutions when you say
Um. So
I'm
this
here
is
taking
actually a
notes.
situation where I would have. This is actually a situation where I would have said yes, because there's as I always try to run away from the corporate marketing world. So there was actually a really, really good example. There is a city in Germany called Karlsruhe. It's all the way south by the border, and there was a liquor store that wanted to do a little Sunday event serving red snappers and having a Hendrix special. That's not even my job. This is something that our sales force is taking care of. But I thought that, if I go to all the fancy bars, so many other brand ambassadors go there. They'd be happy to see me, but they wouldn't be surprised. They, take it a little bit for granted that people from the community and the industry come visit. This guy, he was really, really surprised. He said, "Aren't you the brand ambassador? Why are you here? What are you doing there?" I mean, literally, there's going to be like 5 people coming over. No one knows this place, but it really, really made a difference. I mean, this guy was so excited. I felt like my visit really, really made a difference there. I could have sent someone, but it wouldn't have the same impact. And you know what? The guy who owned that liquor store, that was about 5 years, 6 years ago, we're still friends.
Oh yeah, I
And he
don't know.
still calls
Sometimes
me.
you do have those magical moments, but I'm sure you've also been the place where you've gone and you're like, why am I here? This is such a waste of my time. They could care less. I could have been like, no, I could, barely spoke at all and just stood there all day because nobody came in the store. It was just, they needed a body. And like, I think there's a certain place time you're here because you will get busier, Stephanie, and you will get like, you get to a place where, a great lesson that, oh my God, no, she's the brand ambassador for Lears, and her name's now escaping me. And she said what she realized was I was doing events, I was doing tasks that I should have been outsourcing to other people. And I was, because I was like, oh, this is easy for me. I can just get this done. And her boss said to her, I appreciate you doing that. But he's like, your time is worth money. So you got to realize your time is valuable too. So you could just outsource this to the agency that we're already paying and they could do this and they won't do it as probably as good as you or as fast as you. But I need you to be working on other things that are more important than this one task. This is not something you should be spending your time on. We have bigger projects for you to do. And that's what that's what the agency is for. So it's like she had to learn that. She's like, oh, my time is worth money. Yeah, I need to be more conscious of my own time, what my company is paying me for, because there are agencies, and if you have budgets, you work for a small brand, you might not have those kind of budgets, so it might be different for you, and you might have to do everything. And it is, it's learning that it's not easy to learn because you can get burnout if you try to do everything. So it's like sometimes just learning, like, what are my priorities? What are my goals? Do I have to achieve? Does this help me get my goal? And sometimes you just have to suck it up and do it. Like, when the CEO of the company called me, I'd be like, yeah, of course, I'm showing up to your house and like making drinks for your guests for dinner. Of course I am. Like, there's just certain things you had to do. But anyway, we digress and we're getting to the hour. But all right, so let's talk about this just work quickly. And, now, we're in this interesting new era of time, right? I think trends have changed of what people are drinking. So, and like I've seen cocktail menus change, drastically for bars, like, and what they're serving. So, I don't know, Stephanie, have you seen, now that you're slightly back out there in the world, seeing any new cocktail trends that are happening or spirit trends you're seeing that you didn't see before COVID that might have happened because of COVID?
I think I have found that there's a lot more fun. I feel like there was, because obviously everything it was like doom and gloom, everybody globally kind of lost their jobs around the same time. Everybody was kind of struggling with creativity, reassessing their life goals. There was like a massive period of, difficult growth. And then we're kind of coming out of all of that and people were really excited to come back. So I think that from what I've seen, there's definitely, you've got the mindful drinking, which obviously was also very heavily pushed by COVID because it was like, hey, what are we doing to our bodies? Let's be healthier. And that's something that's absolutely, like I'm fully on board with that. But for me, it was the fun aspect. It's like now that people are back in bars, they've had, some time off, they're re-energized. They're kind of looking at drinks less sterile than they were before. Now it's much more about the experience because they couldn't have the experience for so long, neither the bartender nor the consumer. So I think I'm seeing a lot more blue curacao usage, which I'm always a fan of. Even the flavor blaster, like just kind of having those little elements of fun that's the biggest thing that I've seen, and it's really kind of got me super energized about life going back to pre-COVID times.
Yeah, I think Coco, for you?
Elaine, I love this question, and let me tell you, if I knew the answer to what is the biggest trend right now, I'd be a very, very wealthy man. You know what? I've been asked this question many, many times, and I can never answer because I believe that things come and go and return and are repeated. I don't really believe that there's a particular trend in the cocktail community globally, or maybe in some communities. What I've seen is that people pay more attention to really good service. What I've seen is that beyond to drink, people are paying more attention to hospitality. That it's not enough just to serve a really, really good drink. It's not. I remember when I just started working in bars, I was so cocky. I was so rude. And if anyone walked into my bar and asked me for a Cosmopolitan, I told them to leave because I was so offended that they were not ordering a Sazerac or a Manhattan. And now I feel like we became, I feel like we grew up as a
Yeah.
community, as bartenders globally. And I feel like, if you want to call it a trend, but a more serious approach, to a more holistic approach to bars. You know, great music, great drinks, great service. Yeah, but drink wise, I don't
No,
know.
I get it. It is always a hard question to answer. I guess it's more about seeing. I mean, I definitely know in New York, I've seen, you know, and they're slowly getting back. But I remember like during the summer, Amore Margot, you know, which is a serious, you know, Amaro bar, was serving margaritas for the first time. They were serving, you know, jalapeno, you know, margaritas, you know, because that's what the customer wanted. Like the customer didn't want serious drinks. They just wanted easy, fun. I don't want to think about it, cocktails. And I've seen a lot of the menus like kind of get more simplistic, like just classics, like very simple. Like we went away from like crazy infusions I've seen it is as Steph said, like there are a lot more fun. There's definitely some fun happening, some blue carousel, some frozen drinks, but I am seeing people coming back. Like Mace is now back, like Nico, you know, just released his new menu.
Hi, Nico.
And like at Mace, and it's serious again, like it's serious and drinks and convenient. But the hardest part now is because there's no staff, is being executing the drinks that are now on the menu. And I think that's why a lot of people simplified it, is because they don't have enough staff to actually execute the way they did before. And that's kind of exciting, though, in one way, though. I know there's not a lot of people in the industry right now. A lot of people left. But in some ways, it's kind of like a resurgence, because I think people are, as they come back, because you remember when we got into it, Coco and Stephanie, you're a little bit younger, but you remember 2010 when you got into it, you know.
I'm young too.
Everybody's learning all right? I know, she's young. Getting all the classics, whatever. And then there came a point everybody knew those drinks, right? Everybody knew classics, everybody knew fresh juice, everybody knew everything. But now it's a whole new generation coming in, and then they don't have the education. So there's actually a time right now, like where we could go back to like teaching the basics again, and bringing a whole new generation of bartenders up that are coming out of nowhere. They didn't come from, they're not spoiled. Well, I shouldn't say they're spoiled, but they haven't been in it for a long time. So their knowledge is still kind of raw. I don't know. That's what I've seen, because I've seen a lot of people who didn't have the opportunity to get behind the bar are now behind the bar because they stayed, and they might have been on the floor before and now they're behind the bar. So I think that's giving us a new opportunity to train a whole new generation, which is kind of exciting. At least that's my thoughts. All right. So my last question to both of you is, all right, any last words of advice for new brand ambassadors, you know, coming into the job? So I know, Stephanie, you're kind of new, but still, I'm sure you've learned a few lessons along the way. Coco, I'll start with you. Like anyone,
Right.
like for new brand ambassadors coming into the job, just things you might have learned, or just things you're like, I wish somebody told me when I first came on board.
I think the most important thing is to enjoy the ride. Especially the first few years are some of the greatest. My first few years as a brand ambassador have been some of the greatest years of my life. And I have focused very, very much on work, maybe a little bit too much. And try to, you know, don't forget about the fun. It's still a fun industry. We're still going to bars, talking to people, and having great drinks. So try to, you know, as serious as you are about your product and your brand, try to not to take yourself too seriously, and enjoy the ride.
Love that. Stephanie?
I feel like the best piece of advice that I ever had, because unlike Coco, becoming a brand ambassador was kind of always something that was somewhere on the radar. You know, I really love Irish whiskey, and I was like, if I could be a part of that, that would be cool. But I got a piece of advice many years ago, which was that, you know, even if you're just a bartender, you are creating your own brand. So you have to view yourself as a brand. So if you want to get into brand ambassadorship, you need to start looking after yourself. You know, you can't be messy at parties. You can't be that guy, you know, and if you don't know who the guy is, you're probably that guy. But also, you know, like just kind of, I guess, yeah, just start treating yourself as a brand ambassador. Treat yourself as a brand. You're creating your own brand. Hold yourself accountable. You know, don't be messy. Don't be a jerk. Be presentable. And, you know, just, yeah, try and be authentic. But if your authentic self is a jerk, then don't be that self. Be a different.
Oh my God, you sound just
Come
like
to Berlin, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I'll take you out for drinks.
Yeah, I love that. Yay.
Oh
And
my
bring
gosh,
Ben.
I have. Yes! Oh my God! Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Well, my only words of advice to the two of you, the one thing I have learned is that if you don't know this, especially Stephanie, being so new, is try to take vacation the same time every year. So if you have like 2 or 3 weeks, because or else you'll never take it. So just plan your vacation. Like always take it. Like I started planning it was advice someone gave me and it really saved me. I always take vacation in April because my daughter's spring break is in April and at the end of August. And so that way I can plan, because or else your year just goes by. Or it gets booked up. You're like, oh, I'm going to go away next month. And suddenly your company has booked you into a bunch of stuff. So if you start planning your vacation the same time every year, literally you can start planning a year and ahead, but your company knows you're blocked off at that time. You know you're blocked off at that time and you have something to look forward to all the time. So it's like take 2 times a year that you're like, these are my 10, how much vacation you have, split it up. And then that's the time you go away. And it really does just kind of bookends your year, kind of like breaks it up into like small little breaks. And that way you don't not take your vacation, because it can become very hard not to do that. So that's my tidbit for the two of you and to anybody listening. But this has been great, guys. I'm so happy. Stephanie, I'm so grateful for you driving to a different town to get on to get some power. Thank you so much. It's been lovely getting to know you. And Coco, always a pleasure to get to see you. Thank you for inviting us into your home. And for those of you who tuned in, thank you so much. And I hope you'll join us next week. Until then, you guys stay safe and be good.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys. Pleasure meeting you, Stephanie.
Bye, guys.
Nice to meet you too. Bye.
Bye.